The other thing that you need is, where do you come up with the ideas? Well, there's endless ideas in the world, endless, and there's stacks in novels. I know it's not popular these days to read novels or fiction, but if you want ideas, it's all there. It's in history. It's all there in history. This is an example of one. I did a big event, and I needed a special type of entertainment. And I was reading at the time I, Claudius, which is about the Roman Caesar Claudius, who invaded England. And in it, they talked about how this is in, I wonder what century it would have been, around about the 100 BC or around about then. Anyway, when they invaded England, they were up against what are called the Celtic tribes. Their enemy were the people who lived there. And in it, Claudius got these birds made to scare the locals, which they did. It's a long story, and read the book. It's a fabulous book. Anyway, at the time, I thought, what a great idea. So I got these birds made. These are sacred ibises, by the way, and used them for an event that was hugely effective. And the two performers here, the dancers, they kept that for many years and used it many, many times afterwards. So you've got to keep your eye out for opportunities all the time. Okay, they're there, even when COVID came. Okay, and I was constantly, everybody was so depressed and all these bad things are going to happen. But because I work for myself, I knew that I'd have to get through this COVID period without work. If I was doing events, there'd be no work. So I constantly looked around for opportunities, right, and came up with all sorts of stuff. And now I earn money by not working. Crazy. I know. I don't know. Anyway, either way, keep your eye open for opportunities for your company. Money. Now, money is a very important thing, obviously, and it's not enough to have lots of money. What you've got to realize is that how you're going to distribute that money in your company. Now, what are you going to do with whatever you get? And basically, I always go back to the Babylonian Talmud. That's the Jewish book from Babylon that interprets the Torah. And if you don't know what all those things are, find out. How's this going? That's good. I've got to watch it. Doesn't scrape. All right. So the Talmud says take 1/3 of your money and put it into land, i.e. property. 1/3 in commerce, that means your business, and 1/3 at hand, which means liquid assets, which is things like cash and bank and things you can get money out of. Okay, so that's what I've always kept that in the back of my mind. Now, it doesn't make you filthy rich, but it keeps you in the game, and that's the important thing here. You've got to be in the game for the long haul. If you're going to put an event company together and all the things that have to do with working for yourself, you want to make sure you get many, many years out of it, and you don't want to go bankrupt or lose money very early on in the piece. And that's called Kelly's criterion, by the way, which you can look it up, which is basically how much do you spend on things. Let's say you have, let's say you get $50,000 from a client, right? That's your payment for an event. It's all paid. You've got 50. Now the question is, what do you do with that money? Do you put it into more promotion? Do you put it into a bigger office? Do you go on a holiday? Things like that. So you have to work that out, because you don't just want to spend a lot of money. What you want to do is make sure you've got enough to get through the times that don't work. Like now, like COVID. Right now, a lot of, as you've seen, a lot of events say, we're losing money, we've got no money, and all the rest of these things. Well, that's part of the game, unfortunately. Sometimes you win a lot, sometimes you'll lose a lot, but the trick is to stay in the game. Okay. So the other parts of knowledge, by the way, the whole thing takes about half an hour, my talk, by the way, in case you're wondering. Operational knowledge. So do every job. It's simple, right? You must help clean. You must help move chairs, right? You must lug gear. You must know how to hammer a nail. You must roll up cords. You've got to sweep the floor. In other words, help. Because operations is where it's at with events, and you'll get, firstly, you'll learn about stuff when you do that. And secondly, you'll be highly respected by the people who work with you. In my day, which you can't do now, unfortunately, in my day, it was called learn to drive a forklift. And that meant that when the forklift driver's sick, you can actually jump on the forklift and drive it, and because it's such an important tool in event management. Of course, you can't do that anymore because you've got to get licenses and all the rest of it. But the equivalent thing is to absolutely try to help. Okay, and when you're working with the operations people, be pleasant, for heaven's sakes. You know, polite and pleasantness really works. Okay. And always talk to them. Okay, always talk to them. Believe me, the cleaners will know more about your venue than the owner of the venue will. You get it? The security people will know more about security in that area than anyone else will know. So talk to them. If you're hiring them, talk to them, find out. Just be nice. Often, if they're not busy, they're quite happy to chat. For example, when I came in 2020, in January, if you remember, you probably go back that time, at that stage, no one really knew about COVID in Australia. You know, they hadn't brought in the restrictions or anything. No one knew what was going on. But I tell you who did know were the luggage movers at the airport. They knew because suddenly the luggage dropped by something like 50% coming in from outside. Right now, and so I had a chat to them, and I could tell something big was going to happen. There you go. Okay, now, so that's knowledge. Now we get to responding. Now we get to, skills. Okay, so you've got to have skills, and part of it is obviously coming up with how much, you know, when you're talking to these people, you've got to have the skill to be able to get the price and all the other things together. And the way to get that skill is through the knowledge, is to find out, like the example, I worked for the tax office, okay. So what I did was find out all about the tax office. How did it work? You know, what are the language they, it's all on their websites or in their documentation. You can pretty well get an idea before I went to the meeting. So I understood the sort of language that they would use. And they said, how much am I going to charge them? And I said, here's the pricing. And the pricing is worked out on how much money I would save you over a period of time by the work that I did. And I'm charging you 5% of the amount of money that you would save. Now, I gave them all the figures. They could go for the figures. And because they're all accountants, they loved it. And they could go through it and find any errors or something, but you're talking their language. So, with Blacktown Council, when I worked for them, first thing I did was go straight to the event site and have a look at it. And they said to me, that's the reason I got the job, because I was the only person who went to the event site. So, find out about the places. Logistics is a skill too, even though you've got to have a lot of knowledge, but it's a skill, and it's movement of goods and people, of course. And if you do happen to do things overseas, I won't go into this in great detail because you won't do that in the first year, but it's still, if you know a bit about it, you've got to talk about visas and dealing with idiots and carnets. Okay, you'll find out about carnets. Basically, when you have to cross borders and you go to immigration, you go through all that rigmarole, make sure you've got official papers with you, right? The people behind the desk, they definitely don't want to argue with you. You got it? They basically want to not have a problem in their day. And if you can show them official papers with lots of official stamps on them, that can make it a lot easier for them. And done that in quite a few countries. When you're talking about venues, look, they're all the same, and they're the same for a reason. You know, they've all got loads, depending on what size they are, etc. But they're pretty well the same. Okay, so it's no big deal. The venue side of logistics, they're doing it all the time, basically 12 to 24 hours a day. So find out from them. They'll tell you all about the logistics. Okay, if you go to some of the countries that I've been to, then you're going to get searched. Now we're doing that in Australia. So there you go. We're really getting a lesson with this COVID thing about IDs, security, searches, raids. We've had them down at Bondi, helicopters flying overhead, telling people to disperse. We've had it all. I've had my ID checked more times in Bondi than I did in Saudi Arabia. How about that? Negotiation. Now, this is a skill. When you're negotiating and you've got your own business together, and keep in mind that, that it's not all about money, by the way. Keep that in mind. Okay, there's future jobs, there's all kinds of things. So don't just rattle on about money. Make sure you're dealing with the boss or the almost boss. That's generally you won't deal with the client's boss. You may deal with their assistant, well, not their assistant, but somebody. And your job is to make them look good. Okay. So if you can make them look good, you'll get the gig. You have to think about that. They have to justify the spend on the event because an event is an expense. It's not a money-making thing for a lot of clients. In the corporate field, I'm talking about. It's not a money-making thing for them. It's definitely an expense for them. So they've got to justify it to the accounts or finance department. Okay, so you've got to make them look good so they can justify it. That's why you learn their language. As I said, I negotiate fees on how much it benefits the client. Now, there's all tricks to that. Anything that can be measured is very powerful in negotiation. So anything with a figure next to it is very powerful. And it's a good idea to learn how to measure stuff and estimate things. There's a very good book on it called How to Measure Anything. If you're interested, I can tell you all about it. There's going to be a lot of changes. So don't forget that when you're negotiating for the, whatever it might be, let me think. Let's say it's the launch of an exhibition at the Contemporary Art Museum, okay, which I've done. That was a nightmare. But either way, what you've got to remember is that there will be changes. And unless you put that in the initial negotiation, you'll have to pay for them. In other words, it'll come out of your profit. So you've got to make sure, like, if there are any changes, we have to renegotiate the fee or something along those lines, but definitely flag it when you're getting close to actually settling that deal. Because, like I said, you can lose money on a change that could happen. So everything will change.